Hello, I'm Pablo Arenas, founder of Rev Mode Marketing here in Brantford, Connecticut at the 388 building. I'm here with my dear friend, um, immigration expert and founder of the SMA Law Firm down in St. Petersburg, Florida. Steve is an incredible person. Like I said, for me and everyone else, he is an expert in the field. He's been on he's done speeches around the world. He's been on BBC, Telemundo, Channel 7, Fox, you name it, constantly because of his expertise. I'm honored to have him as a friend. Steve also actually he did my naturalization paperwork, and I didn't think I needed it. So, a quick background: I was born in Chile. I came here in 1984 on a green card. My parents, and we're going to talk about this probably in another episode, but my father came here first. He was petitioned by my uncle, who was a citizen, sent for us. We came here with green cards, and I started working when I was, 16. I had working papers, started paying taxes. I never imagined that, other than not being able to vote until 2016. In 2017, Steve said, "You need to become a U.S. citizen," and he helped me do that. And today, I am, because of him. So I personally know um, the process of the SMA law firm. Steve and his amazing team. Like I said, Steve is also a client of Red Mode. We work with them side by side, and now, I'm honored to have him here on our podcast, and we're going to talk about stuff that's hot right now, that everyone is talking about. It's all over TikTok, and like I said, I'm so excited to have him on because we've been planning. Steve and I have been planning this for about 5 years now. I've been planning this podcast for 10 years, and there's just so much to talk about because there's so much nonsense out there that just people don't understand. So, Steve, I apologize for this run-on introduction.
Oh, of
Um,
course.
we're glad to have you. So, we're gonna dive right in. I don't want to, we'll talk about your background as well because you're also immigrant from Argentina,
Yeah,
and
we have
you
similar stories from similar part of the world, you know.
and I think that's why we forged the friendship and relationship that we have because we understand each other as immigrants. What was your immigration process like when you first came? Because I know that you came here, and then you went back and lived, and then came back, right? And
Well,
uh,
it's still a mystery to me, to be quite honest with you, Pablo, because when I was a child, I was 5 when I moved to the US. My mom was born and raised in New York City, but because she hadn't lived in the US as an adult, when she moved to Argentina, met my dad and had me, and then they split. She couldn't get me a passport. Usually, if you're a US citizen, you have a child, you just go to the US embassy where you're living and you get them a passport directly and they become citizens. But she wasn't eligible because she hadn't lived in the US as an adult. And so we had to go through a bunch of different processes. I was 5, I didn't speak the language. All of a sudden, I'm in a new place and in a massive city with 8 million people, the chaos of New York City, living in the ghetto of Spanish Harlem and completely disoriented. And at the same time, I didn't even understand what status was. All of a sudden, 9 years later, I'm taking the oath. I'm going, I pledge to do all these things to become a US citizen. I didn't really know what it meant. So then I became an immigration lawyer. That piqued my interest in immigration. I had a foray in journalism. I wanted to be a broadcast journalist, and I realized I want to do something more where I can feel the impact of my work. And so I gravitated to immigration law because I'm an immigrant and I want to help other people who are also disoriented and don't understand. And if I go back and analyze my own case, quite honestly, I don't know what the steps were, but probably I had to come in as a tourist and then do an adjustment and all these things. It was a precarious situation to be in. I'm sure my mom had to hire an expert back then, and the law was really sort of Wild West back then. So it's interesting now that it's very topical, actually, because now that the president is talking about the ending birthright citizenship, and maybe now people are coming to me and saying, I just became a US citizen. Should I worry about that being revocable? It starts getting you thinking, like, how far can this go? And we were in the same situation. That's why I said to you, the only way you can be protected is if you're a US citizen, because you never know. You're falsely
absolutely.
accused of a crime, all of a sudden you're incarcerated and you get put in deportation proceedings because you're a resident and not a
You
And
know what's
so
incredible is that how many people do not understand. Now, You know me very well. I'm not into sports, or I live and breathe business. I surround myself with business people, entrepreneurs, and things like this. I'm not a snob by any chance. I just I'm here at the office 7 days. Like you, we're constantly innovating and things like this. And I cannot believe that there are so many people out there that don't understand what a green card is. It's like, well, were you legal? Like what? Of course I was, but you had a green card. Like, and then I wonder, like, how'd you build this multi-million-dollar business and have so successful? And I'm talking about people who are, worth 20, 30 million dollars. And they're like, they don't
Hmm.
understand this process. Right. And this whole time, they're like, aren't you worried? I'm worried about what? I'm a US citizen, I'm a naturalized citizen. Like it's sort of like a joke, but again, that's what the whole idea about this podcast is, to educate people in small bites. Obviously, Joe Rogan has been an inspiration because he's doing a great job at it. I mean, he's talking about all kinds of things, and I've asked you to write how many articles? I mean, I bother you to write articles to educate people
Yeah, we've
uh,
done
about,
probably
about
100 of them, I
so
would say.
much to educate, because it bothers me, because I work with you and I learned so much about immigration. Obviously, the whole team here at Revved, knows so much about it because of you. So now, somebody comes here legitimately like I did in 1984. You just said before, back then was like the Wild Wild West. I
Hmm.
mean, but we came. I came. I came to JFK. It was 1984. It was July
Me
15th.
too.
I was 11 years old, and people are like, "How'd you come here?" I came here on a plane, right? So
Right.
the green card process. Correct me if I'm wrong, you're a legal resident of the United States. The only thing you can't do is vote.
Yeah, you have all the rights and privileges of what a citizen would have, except you can't vote, and most importantly, you are still deportable. Even the 9/11 bombers, if any of them, I think one of them was a US citizen, one of the people who participated in that tragedy. They were not deportable. I think they got 99 years in prison or something, and they'll rot in prison, but they couldn't be deported. So the moral of the story is you have to, and this applies now. I get these questions when I do the media interviews all the time, is what should people do? And the first thing I say is if they have any possible remedies or protections that exist, like temporary protected status or DACA or whatever it might be, or becoming a citizen, they need to do that because they need to make sure that they've maximized the protection they have in the system that we live under right now, right? So this is a living, breathing thing. And people's fear, as you know, the number one thing that fear does is it provokes paralysis,
True.
right? People don't move because they're scared. Even the DACA kids that were eligible, a lot of them didn't apply because they were scared that they would be in the system and then somehow end up being deported. But if there are protections in place, you have to take them. You have to get to the highest level. It's like you want to do in your profession or in the military or anywhere else. You want to get to the top, right? The closer you get to citizen, the more protected you are and the less you have to worry. So I think a lot of people need to be more informed and just not be scared to take those, to take
Especially
them.
with all the stuff that's going on in social media, that again, you talk about scare tactics, and everybody is scared. We all know there's not a person. I don't think there's anyone that you and I know, or that's out there, that doesn't know somebody that's undocumented. When I say undocumented, somebody, I'm going to say somebody that came here on a work visa, or on a student visa, or on a school visa, and then overstayed that process. But these are people that are working, right? These people that are working, and they're paying taxes into a system they'll never be able to collect, but they're contributing. And you and I had this conversation about, several days ago, a
Hmm.
very serious conversation about this. And this has nothing to do with, one thing we'll never do on this podcast is talk about, one or left side, or politics or anything like that, because that's just what it's about. It's not about how I personally feel or how you personally feel. It's the right thing, right? And this time around, President Trump, with the deportation process of getting rid of really, really bad, criminals, really,
Hmm.
really bad people who are connected to really bad, worse people, and it even hurts me being, from Chile, that there are people in Chile doing crazy things here. It's just it's terrible, right? And that's the problem, that this process, you say deportation, you talk about ICE. Today,
Mhm.
February 1st, 2025, you mentioned green card, you mentioned immigration. Everyone associates a person like me, a Hispanic person, or Mexicans, right?
Mhm.
I go to sometimes places that I frequent for years. Someone asked me the last time, "You're Mexican, right?" I said, "No, I'm not. I'm from Chile." "Oh." I said, and you know what I do? I say, "I'm a citizen," just to let you know.
Yeah.
So now, one of the things that we wanted to talk about is all this stuff that's going on. There's a lot of immigration attorneys talking about this on TikTok right now, and I'm it's kind of weird, but I want to start doing this, and I'll tell you, they're actually instructing people to walk around with either their naturalization paper, which is this big, right? It's a big, big
Yeah, it's a
sheet.
massive thing. We both
Yeah,
have. Yeah.
is the only one in existence, right? When I got my passport, the guy said, you make a copy of this because if this gets shredded, it's the only one, blah, blah, blah. So you got to either walk around with this big thing, or I'm going to walk around with my US passport. And or if you have a green card, or green card, it's a permanent residency, you should be walking around with that. Um,
Do you
and if
want
you
to
have,
hear my take on that? I
absolutely,
think I think there's a fine line between prevention and paranoia. So if you're carrying around a document that if you lose could put you in serious jeopardy, or it's very hard to replace, a green card takes, I don't know, 8 months to replace. It's a real pain, which
can
means that you
imagine.
can travel outside the US and come back. Um, if you lose your naturalization certificate, you have to apply for another one. That takes forever. What you can do is carry around a copy of your document, but you certainly don't want to carry around your original. It just,
That's what I
that's
wanted to ask you.
falling
Will
into
that
the,
suffice?
yeah, absolutely, because they just check your A number. You'll have an A number if you're a green card holder. They just check that and see that it's current, you know.
What about my US passport?
US passport, same thing. Just a copy of the biographic page. That's it. Like you're not going to falsify a document and then take a photocopy of it and walk around with that, because
Right,
the authorities can check in 2 minutes in their system and see and confirm. So
right,
that's where you're preventing without letting the paranoia get to you. If you carry around a massive document and have to have a whole briefcase just to carry it, or an extra bigger bag, you're going to be conscious of the fact that you're carrying it, and you're not going to be able to enjoy your day, you
right,
know? So I think you just have to have a miniature version of that tucked away, forget about it inside your wallet or whatever it is. And if that were ever to happen, you would have the proof that you need.
right.
Right now, the enforcement is what's called targeted enforcement. So supposedly, and I say this because we won't know for a while what the numbers look like, but the idea is that the goal is 100% of people that are being detained are the ones that already have outstanding warrants or already
Correct,
convicted of a crime.
correct.
Because what other people don't realize too is that if you are detained, you still are awarded what's called due process. It's the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. Like, you are allowed your day in court. So if you are not illegal, but you're detained, you'll have a chance to show that you are not illegal and you're not deportable. You'll have a chance to do that. What's scary, Pablo, and without getting too much into the weeds, is that a lot of this is the federal government stepping on the toes of states. Because if you have any sort of criminal proceeding, that's a state thing. It's not a federal thing unless it's kidnapping across state lines, or
Right.
drug
Federal
trafficking
crime.
across state lines, or terrorism. It's not or tax evasion, that's the biggest one. It's not a federal crime. It's a state crime, and it should be tried on a state level.
Right.
And so that's where people are getting a little bit worried, is there any limits to the separation of powers, federalism, and all these concepts that when you come from a civil code country like we do, where it says what is not in the civil code is permitted. That's like it by default, right? It's black and white. In America, there are so many levels of jurisprudence, courts, appeals, federalism, which is the division of state and federal powers, and then the separation of powers and the checks and balances between the different branches. It's enough to make anybody's head spin. So we as attorneys that are in this space, we have to try to let people know when the government is overstepping. And that's what's happening here. Yes, I agree with you that nobody wants, in fact, not just America, but no country wants dangerous criminals in their country.
True.
They don't want to award people or reward them, sorry, for entering illegally and let them stay. Obviously, that nobody would want that. So no, I don't think even the most liberal Democrat would say, I want criminals here. Um,
Right.
but you have to give people their due process. Otherwise, our Constitution means nothing. That means everybody gets their chance to defend themselves.
One thing that you're absolutely correct, and one thing is, from what I'm reading, obviously there's this new law that was just passed. I believe, I forget the name, leaves me.
Lake
Um,
and Riley Act.
Yes. So that technically is that the law that's passed that's going to allow them to take this a criminal, someone who's done something completely horrible, and just deport them without due process. Which you may or may not agree with me, but I think that if you're an animal and you do commit a heinous crime like that, and you're smuggling drugs and things like this, whatever the case might be, no matter what country you're from, you need to get out, right? So I don't know. Like I said, you may agree or not agree with me. That's not what this is about. But like I said before, I think they need to get rid of a lot of the bad seeds. And unfortunately, within that net, when you're out there fishing, you're gonna, you're out there fishing for whatever, for tuna. You're gonna get a crab. You're gonna get a dolphin. Who knows?
The
So
thing is, yeah, I know I agree with you. The thing is, it expands the definition of what are sort of deportable crimes to things like theft and burglary, which are misdemeanors in many states. They're not even what they call aggravated felonies. So we
right,
have a double standard in America too. Each state applies a different penalty and a different sort of level of gravity or seriousness to different crimes, right? You could commit the same crime in Oklahoma that you commit in New York, and the penalty is different.
right.
And so it's really confusing. Like, if you want to take the moral high ground here, what is the limit? Are you going to say, and this is a great New Yorker example, having spent a lot of time living in New York, are you going to say jaywalkers that have, entered illegally or deportable now? Like, what's the limit?
Right.
When there's no limits and there's no transparency, that's when we really run the risk of crazy things happening. And a lot of these individuals, maybe, they picked somebody's pocket or did something that I think the biggest crime I ever committed was speeding. I didn't even have a drink till my 21st birthday. So I'm the last person to ask about breaking the law because I've tried to always adhere to it. But what's the limits here? Because a lot of these people also have US born children, and we
That's a
can't
whole different
separate.
yeah.
I'm not all of the illegals are Latinos, but the majority are.
Right.
And Latinos have more children in their families per capita, or average family size is infinitely greater. I think it's like 50% more than the typical American family. So almost always you're going to be separating family members and destroying families. So there has to be a bright line here. It has to be legal, and you have to say this is where the line is drawn, and these are the people that yes are going to be put into proceedings potentially or not. So people know what the line is. That's what I want. I want to know how far does this go, and is it legal for the government to do it? Because if the government oversteps, then it's going to be challenged in court. Then it's going to be held up, like happens with a lot of these executive orders. The Lake and Riley Act is another step above that. It's actually legislation that's been passed. And so we might have to redraw the lines between what's federal and what's state. This could change the entire system. And it's scary to be in a moment of time where everything is changing so quickly.
Like I said, it's sad, because there's a lot of good people here, who are contributing to the economy, and there's a lot of them that didn't come here legitimately, so they didn't have any visas that they overstayed. These are people who crossed the border illegally, and they're doing jobs, and they're washing dishes, and they're plucking strawberries from fields and things like this at 100 degree weather.
Hmm.
And uh but but you just can't, like you just said, there has to be a line that has to be drawn. there is no middle ground when it comes to this, and that's the unfortunate part. It's going to hurt
Yeah.
for I think it's going to hurt for a little bit, but eventually it should. I mean, you remember September 11th. Look at what happened with if me. I mean, I'm brown skin, and people thought that I was I was from Pakistan and stuff. I was getting dirty looks everywhere, and it happened for a long period of time. And today I walk into a place, and me, I'm always dressed presentably, and I get looks, because that's what it is right now. So
Yeah,
that
and
bring
you're
yeah.
seeing this kind of profiling in Florida where I spend a lot of time now. The Florida Highway Patrol is now pulling people over, profiling them to
This
see.
is the double-edged sword. This is the part you mentioned, jaywalk, and you mentioned pickpocketers. So what's happening is that some of the and this, I mean, some of the worst criminals were caught by speeding by a speeding violation, right? They pull them over, they run their stuff, and they see that they have warrants. So I understand where I know a lot of law enforcement people, and I understand that why they have to do these roadblocks. And yes, it's unfortunate that we're going to have to get profiled. If I'm okay, I have nothing to worry about. I have nothing to worry about because I have a business, I pay my taxes, we employ people, and we contribute to the economy. We're not criminals. But there could be a guy that's really bad and looks like me, and just to be able to sift that process, I'm okay with that, right? I'm okay. So I think it's a necessary evil. There's no other way of doing it than to start somehow.
Well,
Um,
yeah, but I mean, we can get into this in another, interview, but the practicality of it too is not there because if you run the numbers based on the averages so far, 10 days into the administration, you're looking at about 250,000 people being detained per year. There are 14 million people that are undocumented or overstayed here. That's 56 years
no,
to eliminate all the people, assuming not one more person comes in illegally into the US, which is a whole other issue because
yeah,
that's also not a reality, right? So you have to, if you remove all the bad seeds or bad apples, as they call them, the worst of the worst, and I'm seeing all these catchphrases, even by the Secretary of Homeland Security has, her ex tweets where she's throwing out these, this hip language or whatever. It's also just it's a show of force because what they want people to do to accelerate the sort of minimize the number of illegals in the US is self-deport. If people aren't going to their churches anymore, to their supermarkets, they're not going to their janitorial jobs, which is what I saw. A lot of janitors aren't going to work. Eventually,
construction
they'll run out of
workers,
money and they'll say, I'm going to go construction. They're going to go home. That's what this administration really wants
right?
because they don't admit the fact they don't have the resources, the manpower, 40,000 ICE agents nationwide. If they're full force right now and they're only deporting, you know, whatever it is, 250,000 per year, they're never going to get to the number zero, right? And the
Right.
reality is that 90% of the people that are here undocumented are working, and they're working in industries like you said, construction, agriculture, services.
Food,
Yeah, they without them, it's like that movie Un Día Sin Mexicanos that came out 2004.
right?
The industry, literally, the economy just shuts down right away.
Right.
So we need to be realist here. And the problem is they're putting everybody in the same basket. In Spanish, we would say poner en la misma bolsa, right?
Yeah,
There's a big difference between people that are, came here when they were 5 because their parents smuggled them across the border and have kept, and, are straight A students and are in college and things. And then the people who came here with the purpose of doing damage and destroying and
correct.
there's a huge difference here, and that the percentages of illegals that are convicted of crimes is lower than the general population.
Hmm.
So you're taking all these bad apples, and there's a lot of them, and you're saying everybody's the same.
Yeah,
And as an immigrant, and you the same, who worked so hard to get to become a citizen and who work really hard and pay taxes and all this, it's kind of insulting that they put us all in the same basket.
it's true. It's true. It's sad. From reading history, it happened in when Pearl Harbor. Obviously, if if you were Oriental, you
Internment
were picked up.
camps.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that in history that's going on. What happened in World War II with Hitler and things like this. So it sucks. It really does. It sucks. It sucks to be Spanish right now. But
We're not all the
but
same, but
yeah,
I
we're not. Yeah.
promise for the law to be bright line. When you come from somewhere else and you end up in the law, what you revere about the US is that it's supposed to be transparent, right? That the law is just and fair and it's applied equally to everyone. Because in a lot of countries that's not the case. And if this continues the way it's trending now, it will not be the case in the US either. And that's really disappointing, you know?
Well, I thank you for that, and it brings me to my last point of this podcast, which has been more than great. And you and I, how many times do we have these conversations? And I say to you, "Oh my God, that would have been great for a podcast." So
Yeah.
I'm glad that we're finally doing this, because it's going to educate a lot of people. For anybody that wants to look up Steve, you go to smaimmigration.com, or you just Google Steve Maggi, attorney Steve Maggi. We do great here at Rev Mode. Wink, wink. The search engine optimization, so people can find Steve. We're talking a lot about personal stuff because we're both immigrants, but the core focus of the SMA law firm, which is another part of the law that people don't understand about, um, it's the business side of the immigration, right? People talk about these visas. I forget who I was talking to a couple of weeks ago, and they said, "Yes, I have a somebody in Greece who wants to bring a this food product here, and there's some kind of visa that if and I'm like, I'm listening to this, I'm like, yeah, that's got to be the E visa.
Yeah.
If they
Mhm.
want to come here and through this visa, and they want to open up a place, in a small place where they want to bring this food from Greece and things like this. So and with that, if you this is the part, right? They say, well, they say that if you bring a business here, you get a green card. And I say that's not the case. So exactly what it is, the exact process, you get the chance to apply for a green card, but there's caveats. There's you have to meet a certain criteria. Is that for any country trying to do that here in the US? Because you do a lot, you do it this around the world. We work with you. You do this from Chile, Colombia, Argentina, the Netherlands, Germany, right? How does that
Yeah. And,
excuse me.
and naming those countries is really relevant to this kind of uh, visa because the e-visa is only available to people with passports from countries that have e-treaties with the US. Currently, there are 81 countries that have a treaty. Greece is an interesting example because it has an E1 treaty, but it doesn't have an E2 treaty, which means the only way that person can set up their business and get a visa is if they already have existing trade. That's a trade-based visa, E1, but they don't have E2, which is investment-based. Investment-based means you can do a startup, you can do you can buy, franchise rights and have a store for a franchise, or you can expand your existing business. But if you don't have a passport or your spouse doesn't have a passport from one of those countries, you have to explore other options. And
So
so
it's not going to work for them if that's the case.
it might not work for them in that case unless it's a trade based. Like if they're selling the products already to the US and they can show high volume of trade, and what they want to do is just have that store there to facilitate and distribute, then we could probably do it. But you
Gotcha.
have to work with somebody that has that list in their head, like I do, and knows, okay, this country doesn't work, that country might work. Or here's an alternative visa, like do a multinational transfer, set up the subsidiary, that sort of thing. And then green card is, people don't get, this is a whole other topic, but short-term and long-term visas are oftentimes completely different paths. So you have to plan accordingly. Like does this person have extraordinary ability? Do they have advanced degrees? Could they self-sponsor?
There are
Uh,
so many areas to this, and that people don't really understand that. That's
Yeah,
frustrating.
and then my chief focus, Pablo, this is to do things the right way and to get good people here. People like us who appreciate the opportunity to emigrate, become part of this, business world and the social fabric and all that, but also to create jobs,
Correct. Contribute.
to contribute something. Those are all my clients. None of my clients are here coming illegally. and none of them are here for a purpose that does not add value. Otherwise, I won't work with them, and that's my ethos, and that's yours, and that's why we align so well, you know.
You're absolutely correct, and like I said, I'm thankful for that, and we learn every day, and it's just unfortunate. It looks like, excuse me, it looks like the climate might be changing. There are some rumors out there that of this merit based green card that President Trump is going to introduce, which I think is brilliant because it would give an opportunity to people who came here and overstayed their visas but are contributing, they're working, they're paying taxes that they'll, like I said when we first spoke, they'll never collect. So, but there's going to be a process. People will automatically think, oh, you're going to give green cards, just blah blah blah. But there's a process. You could be working, but if you have a criminal record, what is that criminal record? Right?
Yeah.
Is it were you jaywalking in LA because they enforce it over there, or whatever? So, but how do you feel about that as an immigration attorney? I mean, your focus is business, and there's an opportunity. We spoke about this. There's a great chance that the SMA law firm, who specializes in these business visas, right, might see this flood of people who have been working here like that, overstayed their visas,
Mm-hmm.
and they're going to want to come into. And I know you're fully equipped. You have an amazing global team, strategically placed around the world. They're a great group of people. How do you see that happening, and working in that regard?
I think it's going to be complicated, just like everything else that we're seeing, right? It's how do you have to classify essentially every single person in the US between the ones who are deportable for real reasons and not just jaywalking, the ones who have exceptional cases, which allows certain things to be overlooked or to be waived. There's something called a waiver in immigration law, which says you committed X infraction, but we're going to still give you this benefit, which is a visa or status or a green card or whatever it is. There'd have to be a bright line there. And the exceptional people would have to be able to prove that they are exceptional. What I can't figure out, Pablo, is what happens with what they call skilled workers. What
Right.
happens to those millions of people that we need that are not necessarily exceptional or at the top of their field or professionals? How do we incorporate them into society? That's kind of what President Obama was hoping to do, is transition them, right? Without sending the wrong message. And messaging, as you know, in 2025 is everything, right?
It is
Are
everything.
you saying that it's okay then to come in illegally because eventually, so what they would have to do is say this only applies to people that are here. Nobody else that enters as of this date will have access to this remedy. You have to, it's a bright line.
You're
We're
absolutely
not
correct.
condoning future illegal crossings because that would contradict all the ideas that we have here that the Trump administration has. None of this stuff that we're talking about, ICE detentions and deportation, works if more people are coming in illegally.
Right. Right. You're absolutely correct. I think they're putting there's going to be a date. So I was going to say, if you came here prior to, let's say, 2021 or two, I doubt it. Let's make believe whatever the year is, and you overstayed your visa, you're going to have a chance to apply for this merit-based visa. Because you're absolutely correct. I didn't even think about that. You hit it dead on. That's why you're an
Yes.
expert in the field.
Yep.
If they were to say that, then everybody would come here, overstay their visas, forever, and just circumvent the process, right?
Correct. And the messaging would be bad, but it would undermine the whole program. So you're right. It has to be a retroactive date. And I think if something like this happens, there won't be any announcements before it's official, because if you say in 3 weeks from now we're gonna cut it
And
off, then there's
right,
gonna be another flood of people coming in. So
oh, you're
I,
absolutely
I even though I have my, pulse, what do they call, ear to the ground and all that, and on what's happening, even the biggest immigration experts won't know this is happening until it's actually happening. And then, of course,
right.
we'll be ready to help. We help people. We don't judge our clients. We try to help them with the remedies that exist. Um, and I recognize that there are a lot of really hardworking people that came in for various reasons, but without them, our economy doesn't work. And let's be honest, Pablo, if you were to say to every American, we were obsessed with polling here in America, right? So if you ask people is it okay for people to come in illegally? And 98% would say no. right? Do you want to stop people coming in illegally? 98% would say yes or whatever, right? But then if you ask them, because this is a byproduct of, the deportations, if you ask them, do you want people to be deported? Most people say yes. And then you say, if the price of your fruit and your services and your housekeeping and everything, the construction costs for your house go up
Right.
50%, yes or no, do you vote for that? Everybody would say no. We can't have both. So we have to recognize that this is an economic structure we have where we have an invisible working class that helps businesses be more profitable and helps drive down costs.
Right.
And so I think that's one reason why this problem has existed for so long, is because nobody will say it out loud, but we really need that invisible class,
You're
right?
absolutely correct. I mean, look, today, February 1st, the tariffs hit. Canada, China, and Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe it's 20 or 25% Canada, 20, 25% Mexico, 10% China tariffs. We here at Revved, we have clients who are manufacturers, and it's gonna change. It's gonna affect because we're already in talks, and they're worried about the budgets and things like this. The budget was planned for X for 2025, but guess what? Things have to change. People are going to take a hit. So we're going to start seeing it. I haven't looked into it just yet, but I know today was day one. Canada is going to hit back, is going to hit us. We have clients that have a distribution centers in Canada, and
Mm.
so we have global clients as well, and we're going to see it not only from an immigration process. We're seeing it from the economic part, which does affect workers and everybody else. Like I said, don't get me wrong. This time around, as I've said to you before, I think this is looking like it's the right thing to do, even though some of these measures are extreme. And yes, some of these measures are some kind of vindictive measures, and that's just comes with the territory. But I
That's
think
yeah.
I think we're in a I hope we're in a right we're in a right path.
Yeah, one thing I would say about that is, and I'm not an economist, but if President Trump has said his goal is these tariffs will push American companies to start producing within the US, right? Which means you need more and more employees. It
Correct.
drives, increase in employment. But if you're simultaneously removing a lot of people in this invisible working class from the US, the people who are undocumented, they can't work at those jobs. And then he actually said, we will need more skilled laborers from outside the US to be able to work at these plants, because you need engineers, you need line
Right.
supervisors, you need people with technical expertise. And Elon Musk and other people in the tech world have said, we don't have enough of these educated, skilled workers in the US coming out of our universities for these kinds of positions that we need. So it's going to drive demand for those kinds of people even more.
Well,
So
he's a huge advocate of the H1 B1 visa, right? Elon and everybody in Silicon
yeah,
Valley.
H-1B1 is for Chileans and
I'm sorry.
Singaporeans, but H-1B, that program is broken. And what you need is also green cards, because people don't want to come here on an H-1B now from other countries and then get laid off, because the tech companies are laying people off every 3 months.
When they get laid off, they have to go back.
Yeah, or they have to find within 60 days another sponsor. It's really hard to do. So try to get people who really deserve it, merit based. They should be getting green cards, because
Right.
then they can really contribute, right?
I like the merit based, Trump's merit based proposal. I think it's got a lot of, no pun intended, merit. It's got a lot of legs, and I think it'll appease a little bit of that labor pain that the country is about to experience or is experiencing now, because a lot of people are not showing up for work
Yeah.
because they're afraid, as you know. It's going to be interesting to see. We have like I see this little bit of this wave is getting bigger and bigger starting today. Immigration, deportations, criminals, and I see right that these guys, whatever, and now this economic stuff that's kind of coming together. But you can't, and you tell me I'm the king of these analogies, and I said it to you the other day. You can't make an omelet without cracking eggs. It just we're going to have to pay the price somehow. And if for those who really understand, and again, not being economist, but like you just said, if we're okay with prices of things going up, if we're okay with that as a country, as a nation, in exchange for getting rid of everybody that is not documented, and I mean everyone who's not documented. I'm not talking about I'm talking about everyone. Those 14 plus
Mhm.
million people
Right.
that are not documented, and we're going to do the job. Our children are going to do, our children's children, and so forth and so on. Then so be it, right? Then so be it. I mean, if you want to go into Walmart and instead of paying $12 for that T-shirt that you can afford, and you're going to pay $78, then you're just gonna, instead of having 50 shirts in your wardrobe, we're gonna go back to the 1940s and 50s or the 1920s when people just had like one or two outfits, right? Who knows? No one does. But I do want to thank you for taking the time to it's an honor really to have you on this podcast. Like I said, we've been talking about
Same,
this
Pablo.
for a long time. We work daily together. You have an amazing team. They're dedicated people. They specialize in immigration, and like I said, you have them strategically placed around the globe. And for everybody, for those of you who are listening, if you're interested in finding out more about business immigration, again, Steve's is not, but on the criminal side, he's not. He's a business lawyer. He's an immigration expert, business lawyer, and he welcomes questions. He's extremely busy. We're thankful that he came and sat with us this morning. We're going to continue to do it. We have a lot to talk about. SMAimmigration.com, the Steve Maggi. If you Google him, you'll find him. There's an awesome contact form. You fill it out, you ask a question, and if it's a silly question, he won't answer. I can tell you that right. If it's a good question, you'll get an answer right away. So if you do fill out that form and you get an answer right away, that means you asked a good question. So Steve, I can't thank you enough. And for you guys who want to learn more about Rev Mode, we are revvedmode.com, REVVED mode.com. That's right. It's not Revved, it's Revved. Thank you. Later,
Thank
Steve.
you, Pablo. Bye.
Ciao.